in week 2 of our series, Things Happen. It's our 3-part series. Last week, Pastor Matt talked about why bad things happen. And if you weren't here, I highly recommend you check that out on our website or our podcast to kind of catch you up with where we are. But today, we're in part 2 of Things Happen because disappointment happens. Somebody should make a bumper sticker, right? Things happen. Maybe Forrest Gump could have had one. But what we're going to talk about is disappointment. Now, let's all be honest. How many here have ever been disappointed, ever? There's a couple of people who have a charmed life. Everybody is wanting to be you guys that didn't raise your hands. We've all been disappointed by someone else. Probably been disappointed by our circumstances. Occasionally, we've been disappointed by our own self. And we're all disappointed because disappointment does not discriminate. No matter if you're young, old, rich, poor, black, white, a UK fan, a Louisville fan, no matter what, discrimination or disappointment will happen because disappointment does not discriminate. But how we respond to disappointment changes who we become. It shapes who we become because we all have disappointment, but how we respond to it is what matters in shaping us into who we become. So let's talk about the problem with disappointment before we start dealing with how to respond to disappointment, because disappointment brings on a problem, and it makes us start playing games. It makes us start playing the blame game. All right? Something bad happened. I am disappointed. So first of all, it has got to be somebody else's fault. It wasn't mine. Who do I need to make responsible for my disappointment? Or we got to start blaming it on our circumstances. Man, I am disappointed. It's just because, if I would have had what they had, or if I grew up here, or if I had more money, whatever, we got to blame it on our circumstances about why we are disappointed. Then sometimes there's some just disappointments that we're not sure who to assign it to, so God gets the blame for those. Those are the big ones, and we don't know, but we're disappointed and we blame God. God, why did you allow that to happen? It's your fault, God. And the blame game, we love to play this because when we play the blame game, it makes us feel better for just temporarily because we get to assign the blame to someone else. We're trying to build up a reason for people to give us sympathy. We're trying to get people on our side of the disappointment. And also, if we can blame somebody and get people to look at that blame, it takes the eye off of me. And it makes me less responsible for the disappointment. Now, disappointments in life are all across the spectrum. We have little minor hiccup disappointments, and we have major life-changing disappointments. There's some, you go through the drive-thru, you tell them no pickles on your burger, and you get it, and there's some pickles on your burger. How do you respond? It can tear up your day sometimes, right? Because you were disappointed because you did not want pickle juice on your burger. You've been waiting to go see the movie. You've been waiting to go see it. You show up and it's out of tickets. Sold out. Can't get in. Maybe you're disappointed with your playing time on your sports team. You didn't get a start. You got a bad grade you didn't think you had. Small stuff. Then sometimes there's disappointments like you're fired. That's a whole nother level of disappointment there. Or, I'm sorry, the economy's bad, we got to let you go. That's another level of disappointment. Or, you find out your spouse is having an affair. That takes it somewhere else. Or, I'm sorry, but you're not able to have children. I'm sorry, there was an accident, and they're not going to make it. You are going to have a child, but they're going to have special needs. Whole spectrum of disappointment there. Completely different things. And how do we respond? We automatically default to the blame game. That is built into each of us to automatically, who are we going to blame? Somebody needs to fire that kid at the drive-thru for putting pickles on my burger. If you would have got ready quicker, we would have got there earlier and got tickets so I could see the movie. If that coach he just don't like me and won't play me. That teacher just don't like me. Well, my boss is a jerk and he don't understand I've got kids to feed. Well, that company, they're just greedy and they don't care about anybody else but making money. God, why did you allow that to happen? Why did you let them die? Why did you allow that to happen to my kid? Disappointment happens. How we respond to it matters. And the blame game doesn't help. That's where we always go every single time. It's our default mechanism when disappointment happens. The problem is when we blame and blame and blame and blame, we're just assigning a name to our problems and not doing anything about it. And this is the oldest game in civilization. Last week, Pastor Matt talked about the reason bad things happen. It was in Genesis. The serpent deceived Eve. She told Adam to eat. God finds out. What did you do? Eve says, it was that serpent. She starts blaming. But here's where it gets better. Then look, Adam, what's your excuse? Well, that woman you put me here with, so he throws Eve under the bus and blames God. Don't we love to do that? It's not our fault. She held a gun to my head and made me eat the apple. The blame game is the oldest game, and we all go to it. First response every single time. Every single time. But we're going to look today in the New Testament, in the book of John, about an event that happened back in the first century, and it was recorded in the book of John, and it's all around disappointment, the blame game, and how Jesus says to respond. So let's look at what Jesus says. We'll start in John chapter 9, verse 1, and, excuse me, it says, and Jesus was walking along, and he saw a man who had been blind from birth. So we got some disappointment here to lay out this situation. There's a blind man. Now, where he was walking along, they were walking along by the temple. He was going to the temple where he usually taught to people. And that's where a lot of blind or crippled people hung out because they were hoping the good church-going people would drop them a dime or so they could do something. But there's disappointment. The man has been blind from birth, so he is disappointed in life. You know, and when he was little, he could hear the kids going and playing and laughing, but he couldn't figure out why. Disappointment. As he's older, he knows that, hey, as a man, he's supposed to be helping his family, and he is no use. He's only a burden to his family. He sits there and he hears everybody talking about him, feels sorry for him, and there's nothing he can do about it. Life has been disappointing for him, but not just him, about his family. Think about the parents. Excited or having a baby, especially a boy, because back in that time it made a difference. But he was born and he's born blind. So the parents are excited, then the disappointment hits. Then the grandparents, they're excited for their kids. Oh, our kid's having a baby. Oh, okay. It's blind. Disappointment for their kids, disappointment for their grandson, because life's going to be different. Let's look at verse 2. Rabbi, this is Jesus' disciples calling Jesus Rabbi. Rabbi, his disciples asked him, why was this man born blind? Was it because of his own sins or his parents' sins? They went straight to the blame game. Two possibilities. It's either his fault or his parents' fault. Which is it? Who is to be responsible for this? A lot of blame going on here. The man that's blind. My parents must have done something to make me blind. God's punishing them through them. Or if my mom would have took prenatal vitamins, or if my dad wouldn't have done whatever he did to cause this, or God, why did you do this? The man is blaming. And then there's the parents. I'm sure at some point the parents are blaming each other. Because if you have kids and things go bad, ultimately you start looking at each other like, I'm sure the parents were blaming each other and ultimately blamed God, or they blamed their parents. Everybody's blaming somebody here. But even the disciples who don't even have an argument and that show up, hey, Jesus, whose fault was it? Why did this happen? Everybody's blaming somebody. Why do we like to do that? Because it makes us feel better. Now, on disappointment here, before we kind of go on, I want to look at 3 types of disappointment. The disciples pointed out 2. We have self-induced disappointment. It's our least favorite, which means we are disappointed in what's going on because of something I done. That's usually the last one we look to. We usually blame ourselves last. There's others-induced disappointment, which is our favorite. His fault, her fault. I wouldn't be like this if they wouldn't have done that. Their fault. Somebody else put me in this position. And that happens. And this is what the disciples thought. Well, all right, what happened? Is it his fault or is it somebody else's? We never consider the third type. We don't like to consider the third type. There's life happens disappointments. Just things happen that are out of our control. It just happens. We live in a broken world, so things aren't perfect. And things roll around and we end up being disappointed. When these disappointments happen, there is a better option than playing the blame game. We don't want to play the blame game because it does nothing to help the situation. Because disappointment can actually be a good thing. And I know you're sitting there thinking like, well, go ahead and tell me, preacher. If I'm disappointed, how's it going to be so good? Or you're thinking, let me tell you about my disappointment, and then you tell me what's going to be good about it. You don't know how much disappointment I've been through. Explain that to me. We've all been disappointed and all across the levels, and I don't disagree with it. Disappointment happens. I'm not saying you shouldn't be disappointed. What do we do when it happens? How do we respond? Because it can be a good thing. It can be a positive thing because disappointment is necessary for us to mature. Disappointment is required for us to grow as an individual. How many times has life been going good and we feel like, man, life's good and I am just growing so much as a person? We're not, because we are happy way we are. But sometimes disappointment happens and we have to stop. Put the pause button on life and figure, okay, why is life not going good? Why am I disappointed? And we got to start kind of figuring out what's going on. And we can either blame somebody and stay like we are, or we can figure it out and grow. Change from the disappointment. Become who God created us to be. So disappointment can be good, and it's necessary for us to mature, to grow up. Because what happens sometimes when disappointment happens, a lot of times we've got to stop and realize there's some unrealistic expectations in my life going on. Maybe I have some expectations that just aren't going to happen. And I'm disappointed because they didn't get there. Maybe I've been taking things for granted. I always thought the money would be there. I always thought my wife would be there. I always thought he would be there. And then when we take them for granted and all of a sudden it's not, what do? Blame, 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 blame? Or figure out what's going on so we can grow from that situation. Maybe we got to stop and figure out we've been neglecting something. And while we're just enjoying the good ride and things are going great, something important is being neglected. And all of a sudden we hit some disappointment and realize, ooh, I forgot about that part I need to take care of. Sometimes, some way, when we're disappointed, we try to make a situation about us that's not about us. Then we get disappointed when it's about someone else. We should be trying to help them. But we hit the pause button and it makes us stop. And then we can decide, do we blame or do we learn and grow? That's what we got to decide to happen through disappointment. That's how disappointment can be a good thing. What if there is a purpose? What if there's a point of us experiencing disappointment in life? Would that change your attitude towards being disappointed if you know that something good could come out of it? That there's a reason for it to happen. Well, let's go on with our story with Jesus. So they asked Jesus, hey, whose fault is it he's blind? His or his parents? Here's what Jesus says. It was not because of his sins or his parents' sins. They're like, mind blown there. What other reason is there? Because the first century, especially among the Jewish first century people, they thought almost all bad things happened because of a punishment from God from some type of sin. And Jesus came and showed us, no, sometimes bad things happen. It's how things respond. But it's not their fault. It's not his fault. He said, this happened so that the power of God could be seen in him. That's a big purpose. The NIV or ESV version also says, so that the works of God might be displayed in him. Now, if we're not careful, we can overlook the power of God could be seen in him. Does it say the power of God will be seen in him? No, because it depends on his response to his disappointment. We're going to see in a few minutes. How we respond to the disappointment decides whether we'll allow God's power to be seen in us or not. We can determine if we're going to allow God to work in us or not sometimes, based on our own attitude or response. On our own attitude or response. So, looking to blame changes nothing. But during disappointment, if we look to God, look to Jesus, his power may be seen in us. Now, during disappointment, there's a possibility that God wants to do something that's so awesome that we never thought about it, something that's so awesome that it blows our mind, something that's so awesome we could never, ever have done it on our own, but it all depends on how we respond to him. So what we got to do is we got to change games. So like we talked about earlier, when disappointment happens, we always hit the blame game. We need to play a different game. We need to play follow the leader. Who played follow the leader when they were little? Anybody? Yeah. Crazy. And you start doing crazy things, and let's see who can run through the creek. Let's see who can climb that tree. And as long as you kept up with the leader, you were in the game. You were winning. The first time you didn't do what the leader did, you're out. You lost. Disappointment. Follow the leader is the game we need to play during disappointment. Now let's look at the rest of the story. This is where it gets really, really interesting and fun. Jesus said, all right, so the power of work could be displayed in him. Verse 4, we must quickly carry out the task assigned by the one who sent us. Now let's not mention carry out the task. There's something we got to do. We got to follow the leader. If the leader says climb the tree, we climb the tree. If he says jump in the creek, you jump in the creek. We got to carry out the assignment from the one who sent us. Jesus is talking about, this time he's talking about, we got to do what God sent us to do. And then he said, the night is coming, and then no one can work. But while I am here in the world, I am the light of the world. All right. Here this is already a play on the blind man. He can't see. He has no idea of light. And he's talking about light and darkness. But he's talking about spiritual blindness and spiritual sight. So we can see Jesus is about something that nobody expected. Everybody's like, just because sin, and Jesus kind of alluding that, hey, there's something going on here. There's something more spiritual going on here. Verse 6. Then he spit on the ground, made mud with the saliva, spread the mud over the blind man's eyes. Perfect sense, right? Who would think of doing that? Why would Jesus do that? And then here Jesus says, go wash yourself in the pool of Siloam. So the man went and washed and came back what? Seeing. He was blind and now he sees. Somebody should write a song about that. That would be awesome. But let's think about this. This makes no sense. I am blind, God. How many times do we want to say, you made me blind? I tell you what, if you go rub a spit off your eyeballs and put on down there in that certain pool I told you to, you'll be all right. Why do I have to do that? I've heard stories about you from others that you just touch people and they're healed. Why don't you just do that for me? There's a command here. It says, go and wash. And the man went and washed. He played follow the leader. He obeyed Jesus' commandments. And the result, he saw a miracle. He saw the power of God. He saw the work of God. He could see again. Now, this makes no sense. Think about this. He's blind. He's been there for years, collecting money. He hears people talk about him all the time. And he probably heard something about this special rabbi named Jesus that's supposed to be able to hear people. So he probably is getting a little excited. Maybe there's a little bit of hope there, but, he's still disappointment. And then he hears Jesus say something like, well, this happened so the power of God can be displayed in him. And he's like, yeah, boy, explain that one to me. I've been here blind all these years. How's God going to get power out of me being here a blind man? How's this going to work? And then God starts doing something a little crazy. Use a spit to make eye patches. You got to think, the crowd's sitting there watching this and saying, you're gross. The guy's not sure what's going on, and he feels Jesus rubbing on it. Probably don't know it's spit. Hopefully not, unless he hears those people saying, did you see that? He rubbed spit on his eyes. He's probably thinking, what's going on here? I can't see, but they're rubbing slobbers on me. And he says, go to the pool of Siloam. Okay, they're in the temple. The pool of Siloam is outside the city wall. It's kind of like the equivalent of us being here and having to walk to Prestonsburg Elementary School. Blind. That's not an easy task. If I was to look and say, Shane, tell you what, I give you $1 million if we make you blindfolded, you go down to Preston Elementary School and come back. First of all, you ain't going to be able to do it by yourself. It's not easy. It's going to require assistance. He's going to have to find somebody to show him. And then he's got to do this. It's probably at least a couple hours, at least. And he's heard stories of Jesus just touching people and they're healed. No, I'm going to rub some spit on your eyes, and you figure out how to get down there and get back. And that's all he said. He didn't say, if you do this, you can see. He didn't say, I will promise you something awesome if you did this. He just said, do it. No guarantee. No promise. Just said, do it. Now, if Jesus would have said, here, I'm going to put this on your eyes. You go do this, and I promise you when you come back, you can see. That would have been easy. He would have found anybody around there to carry him. He would have felt his way all the way there on his own if he had to and done it so he could see. But Jesus didn't promise that. He said, no, just go do this. Just trust me. What will happen, Jesus? Just do it. It's the same with us during disappointment. He wants us to obey him. We're going, what do I get out of it? You just have to wait and see. Now, we love this story because a blind man can see. We're going to read this whole chapter today, and I'm going to give you homework. Go home and read chapter 9 of John today. The entire chapter will take you 3 minutes. It's really awesome. You need to read your Bible. Anyway, check it out. But the biggest thing happened. The power of God is the man was saved. The man's eternity was changed forever. Whether he could see or not, what mattered is that he had a relationship with Jesus now, and he was going to see one day, whether it's on the side of heaven or on earth. There was no promise of seeing on earth. But following Jesus, he believed. Eternity was changed forever. And then Jesus also blessed him on this side of heaven because he trusted. Because he trusted. So, sometimes Jesus does us the same way. Why is life hard, Jesus? Just trust me. Well, what should I do, Jesus? We're going to play follow the leader. We want him to go, poof, things are better. Poof, here's your wish. There you go. Don't worry about it. I've taken care of it. And sometimes he wants us just to follow him in some crazy things. He asks each of us to do crazy things. I can remember the time he said, start a church. I'm thinking, I ain't playing this game. This is stupid. But once you start following, not knowing where it's going, that's when you get to see what's going on. It's about trusting him and following him. Now, let's go back to our 3 types of disappointments again. Number 1 was the self-induced type. Now, each of these type of disappointments, there's already a response for us built in to do, besides blaming somebody. Now, if it's a self-induced disappointment, hey, Jesus says repent, stop what you're doing, and turn back towards me. Spend a whole another day on that one. We're not. Others-induced disappointment. I am disappointed because that person did something to me. You know what Jesus says do? Forgive them. How many times? 7 times 77. Forever. Just keep forgiving them. That's another whole message there. We're going to skip that. But what about these life happens, times we have no control of, things that just, we usually end up blaming God for what happened. You know what he's saying do? Obey me. Obey you doing what? Whatever I tell you to do. What do you want me to do? That's where we got to listen to him. Where we got to read his Bible and see what he says to do. We know the problem is we don't like to obey. We don't like to follow the leader because we usually want to be the leader. We want to be in charge. But following the leader, obeying Jesus, leads us to an experience with God. Following the leader allows us to see the power of God. It allows God to work in our lives. That's something we could never do on our own. It's something we could never experience on our own. That's something blame definitely will not bring us to. And when we have things going on, that's what we want. We want God to show up and do a miracle, but we want him to snap his finger and do it, and we don't want to follow him. They go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. Being blind and now seeing can be as simple as doing what Jesus tells you to do. May not be fun to start with. It may be not what our heart is, but it is. Sometimes we see things that we could never imagine. And also, the people around us get to see these miracles happen too, which may be almost as important as us experience on our own because it influences others. Sometimes it's not a miracle. Sometimes it's just the ability to get through something we didn't think we could get through. You know, have you ever met someone who's going through a bad experience and they've just gone through it good? We can't figure out, man, there's something different in them. How they managed to do it? Because they follow God. But the most important thing is the guy believed in Jesus, and his eternity was changed forever. So, I'm going to give you a challenge here. You got a Connect card there and a pen. What I want you to do, what is your biggest disappointment? What's your biggest disappointment in life right now? Give it a name. Write it down on your Connect card. You're all glad, I'm glad he brought up all these bad memories right now, right? Write it down. This is what I want you to do. We're going to follow the leader here. Once you've given it a name, ask, am I playing the blame game? Whatever that disappointment is, are you blaming somebody? Are you blaming other people? Are you blaming your circumstances? Are you blaming God? Are you blaming yourself? And this one, you probably might not have an answer right now. Take that card home with that question beside of it and figure out, who am I blaming for my disappointment? And come up with an honest answer on that. Then the third thing, am I allowing God's work to be displayed in my response? Now, if your answer is, am I playing a game, yes, the answer to this is no. Which guarantees you can pray all you want, but until you obey, you're not going to get God's power in this situation. You're not going to experience God's work in this situation until you respond, until you let him spit mud balls in your eyes, walk 2 miles, blind and come back. Or whatever it is he's asking you to do and follow the leader. What is it he's asking you to do? Answer those this week. Give yourself some honesty. And you can change, you can shape, you can grow through whatever disappointment is hitting you right now in life. Now, why? Sometimes you think, why would we want to do this? I mean, I feel like life is a disappointment and I'm already vulnerable right now. Why would I want to make myself more vulnerable? That don't sound fun, does it? But that's the only way we can change and grow, is to become vulnerable to Jesus. The blind man made himself very vulnerable. Didn't know where he was going, how he was going to get there, and had no promise of getting better. But he did it anyway. That's the way. We can't control it. We have to be vulnerable to Jesus. And because this, obedience gives us experience. Experience in the follow the leader game. Experience in trust. Because that's what he wants. He wants us to trust him because he's laid out a plan for our lives. And if we will trust it, it will be better than anything we could have ever imagined on our own. We can get through things that we never thought we could get through, but only when we trust him. And trust builds by trusting. You can't not trust and experience anything. I have a friend. I love her to death. She hates boats. Scared to death of boats. She believes boats work. She has family that's been on cruises that came back okay. She's seen people get on boats here in the lake and be okay. But she won't get on one herself. Nothing has ever changed over the years on her disappointment in this boat fear. Because she won't get on one. She won't follow, even though it don't make sense. Even though I don't see how that big, giant, massive ship out in the ocean stays afloat. But it does. But unless you get on it, you don't experience it. Nothing changes. You just keep blaming somebody for your fear of getting on that boat. Obedience is about trusting Jesus. Not knowing the end result, but just knowing it's better than what we have on our own. Giving up that control. Even when it don't make sense. Even when it's spitballs in your eye. Because it leads to experiencing God's power. Something we do not have on our own. Something we can't experience on our own. Crazy game, follow leader. Maybe you lost your job. Instead of just holding up, hiding from the world, being mad at God and everybody else, realize, hey, maybe this is a time that God wants you to spend some time with your family and your kids and teaching them about the reliance on God no matter what. About following the leader no matter what. And it can change your relationship with God and the future of your children's relationship with God. Maybe you're short financially. It's like there's never enough money at the end of the month. God, why is this? Why is this? Why is this? You know what God's going to say? You want to get better at it? Tithe. Why would I do that? I don't have enough money anyway. Because when you do that, it lets you do something you didn't think you could do on your own. And what it does, it really makes you pay attention. Sit back and reflect of what you're neglecting, about your priorities. It's not about having more money. It's about what you do with what you have. Most people that do that realize with the same amount of money in tithing, they have money left over at the end of the month. Why? It don't make sense. But Jesus don't always make sense in what he wants us to do to get us to where he wants us to be. Maybe someone close to you dies. We love to blame God on that. Why did you take them from me? Why did you do that, God? Why did you do that? I don't know the answer. Life happens. But what he does know is he can get you through it. You don't have to end your life because somebody else is dead. You don't have to remove yourself from everybody else around you because he's dead. Because somebody passed away. And when you follow God through this situation, Do what he says, even though when it don't make sense. People around you see the difference. They want to know, man, they've got something different. They've got a power in them that I don't have. Where does that come from? It comes from God. But only when we obey him, only when we follow the believer. Whatever your disappointment is, God's asking you to do something I am positive that on the top doesn't make sense. Guarantee you it's against what culture says. But that's the only way we can experience his power. It's how we turn disappointing things into good things.